What happens when the weakest becomes the most powerful? For Sarah Whitlock, life as an Omega in the Ironclaw pack meant silence. It meant lowered eyes at pack gatherings, meant serving dinner while alphas laughed, meant feeling her wolf, small, suppressed, barely a whisper, curled tight in the cage of her chest. She'd lived 23 years in the shadow of her father's disappointment, her mother's tight-lipped warnings to stay quiet, stay small. She was the embarrassment, the genetic mistake, the daughter who should have been strong. But when Alpha King Donovan Ironclaw rejected her as his mate in front of 300 wolves under the blood moon, severing their bond with a blade of pure dominance that left her screaming on the marble floor of the great hall, everything changed. And what happens next? No one was prepared for. Not the pack that threw her broken body into a winter storm, not the 10 ancient warriors who'd been searching for her across centuries. And certainly not Sarah herself, who was about to discover that the weakest wolf in the territory was never weak at all. She was a queen in chains, and someone had just shattered every lock. The scent of champagne and expensive cologne filled the great hall, mixing with the musk of 200 dominant wolves dressed in their finest ceremonial attire. Sarah stood at the edge of the crowd, her simple gray dress a stark contrast to the silks and velvets surrounding her. The fabric scratched against her skin, but she didn't adjust it. Omegas didn't draw attention to themselves. Omegas didn't fidget during the lunar ceremony. Her wolf stirred, a tiny, fragile presence that felt more like a ghost than a beast. "Shh," Sarah whispered internally, "just a little longer." The ceremony was beautiful, she had to admit. Moonlight streamed through the vaulted glass ceiling, illuminating the raised dais where Alpha King Donovan Ironclaw stood in black ceremonial robes. He was magnificent, 6'4" of raw power, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from granite. His scent filled the room, forest loam, dying embers, ozone before a storm, and cold steel. It was the scent of absolute authority. And 6 weeks ago, Sarah had felt the mate bond snap into place between them, like a golden thread stitched through her soul. She told no one. How could she? An Omega mated to an Alpha King? The pack would laugh, her parents would panic, and Donovan... Well, Donovan had looked at her exactly once since the bond formed, his ice-blue eyes scanning over her like she was a stain on the wallpaper before moving on. Tonight, Donovan's voice boomed through the hall, silencing the crowd. We gather under the blood moon to honor the old ways, to reaffirm our pack bonds, to celebrate strength. His gaze swept the crowd, landing briefly on Sarah before sliding away. Her chest ached, and to announce my chosen mate. Sarah's heart stopped. Chosen, not fated. Chosen. Lady Vivian. Blackthorn. Donovan extended his hand toward the crowd, and a vision in crimson silk glided forward. Vivian was everything Sarah wasn't, tall, powerful, beautiful, with midnight black hair and the confident stride of a born beta. Her scent, cinnamon, iron, and something sharp like fresh blood, preceded her like a declaration of war. Vivian took Donovan's hand and kissed his knuckles, her smile sharp as knives. "My king!" The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah couldn't breathe. The bond in her chest twisted, screaming in protest. She pressed a hand to her sternum, trying to hold the pain inside. "However," Donovan continued, his voice cutting through the celebration, "there is one matter we must address first." The hall fell silent. Donovan's eyes locked onto Sarah's across the distance, and she felt his alpha dominance crash over her like a tidal wave. Her knees buckled. Several wolves turned to look, following their king's gaze. "Sarah Whitlock." Her name in his mouth sounded like a curse. "Come forward." "No," her wolf whimpered. "No, no, no." But her body obeyed before her mind could protest, her feet carrying her through the parting crowd. Whispers followed her like poison. She reached the dais, her legs shaking, and forced herself to look up at the male who held the other half of her soul. His expression was carved ice. No warmth, no recognition of what burned between them. "You felt it," he said, his voice low enough that only the front rows could hear. 6 weeks ago, the bond." Sarah's throat closed. She managed a tiny nod. "And you said nothing." A statement, not a question. I thought..." Her voice emerged as barely a whisper. I didn't think you'd want. You were correct. The words hit like physical blows. I don't want an Omega mate. I don't want weakness standing beside me. I don't want you. The crowd's whispers turned to gasps. Her father's face in the third row had gone white. Her mother looked away. By the ancient laws, Donovan continued, his alpha power building in the air like static before lightning. I, Donovan Ironclaw, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, formally reject you, Sarah Whitlock, as my mate. I sever our bond. I cast you from this pack. I deny you before the moon goddess herself. The last word detonated in her chest. Pain. Blinding, excruciating, world-ending pain. The golden thread that had connected them, that had hummed with warmth and promise and possibility, turned to barbed wire and ripped itself out of her soul, tearing through every nerve ending, every piece of her that had dared to hope. Sarah screamed. She collapsed on the marble floor, her body convulsing as the mate bond severed. It felt like dying. It felt like being ripped in half while still breathing. Her wolf howled in agony, a sound that never reached her throat because she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only writhe as magic and biology and destiny all tore themselves apart inside her. Through the haze of agony, she heard Vivian laugh. "Guards," Donovan said, his voice distant and cold. "Remove her. Take her past the northern border and leave her. She is no longer pack. She is no longer anything." Rough hands seized her arms. She couldn't fight, could barely see through the tears and the pain. They dragged her through the crowd, her body still spasming from the rejection. She caught glimpses of faces, her father, stone-faced and silent, her mother, weeping but not moving. Pack members she'd known her whole life, watching with pity or disgust or terrible satisfaction. The massive oak doors of the great hall slammed shut behind her. The guards hauled her across the grounds, her feet dragging uselessly. The night air hit her like a slap. Winter had come early this year, and snow already dusted the ground. She wore only her thin ceremonial dress. "This is mercy," one guard muttered as they reached the tree line. "Quick death in the cold versus slow death from rejection sickness." They dumped her onto frozen ground 30 yards past the border marker, on the edge of the forbidden reach, a stretch of wilderness so remote and dangerous that even patrols avoided it. Rogue wolves hunted here. Worse things, according to legend. Sarah lay in the snow, her body still shaking from bond severing, and watched the guards' retreating backs disappear into the trees. Silence descended. She was alone. The cold seeped into her bones slowly, almost gently. Snowflakes began to fall, fat and soft, covering her gray dress with white. She couldn't move. The pain in her chest where the bond had been was worse than the freezing, a raw, gaping wound that nothing would ever heal. Her wolf had gone silent, not dormant, absent. So this is how it ends, Sarah thought distantly. Not with a fight, not with defiance, just cold. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, then another, and another. Time became meaningless. She might have lain there for minutes or hours. The snow piled higher, and her fingers went numb, then her toes, then her face. The pain in her chest dulled to a distant ache, and even that began to fade. "Maybe this is better," some distant part of her whispered. "No more disappointment, no more shame, no more being not enough." Her eyes drifted closed. Sarah. The voice came from inside her mind, but it wasn't her wolf. It was deeper, older, and it sounded like distant thunder. "Not yet, little queen, not yet." Warmth bloomed against her side, then her back, then her front. Sarah's eyes fluttered open and found herself surrounded by wolves. 1, 2, 3. Her numb mind counted slowly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 massive wolves circled her, their bodies pressed against hers, sharing their heat. They were enormous, twice the size of any alpha she'd ever seen, with thick winter coats in shades of gray, silver, black, and white. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, gold, amber, green, ice blue. One wolf, the largest, lay directly in front of her. His coat was silver gray, shot through with darker streaks like storm clouds, and his eyes were the color of winter sky. He watched her with an intelligence that was distinctly unwolf. "You're alive," the voice rumbled through her mind. Not words exactly, impressions, feelings. Sarah tried to speak and managed only a whisper. Who? The silver wolf huffed, his breath warm against her frozen face. The other wolves shifted closer, tucking their bodies around hers more tightly. Gradually, agonizingly, warmth returned. Sensation crept back into her extremities, and with it, pain. She gasped and curled into herself, but the wolves didn't move. They stayed, a living fortress against the storm. Sleep, the voice commanded gently. We'll keep watch. Why? She breathed. The silver wolf's eyes seemed to smile. Because we've been waiting 300 years for you. Sarah's vision blurred, and this time when darkness took her, it was soft. She woke to the sound of a crackling, fire, and the scent of burning pine. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to dim light. She lay on a bed of furs inside what appeared to be an old hunting cabin, little more than a single room with a stone fireplace, a few scattered furnishings, and walls that had clearly seen better decades. But it was warm, it was shelter, and she was alive. Sarah sat up carefully, her body aching but functional. The pain in her chest where the bond had been was still there, a constant throb, but it no longer felt like dying, just like loss. You're awake. She spun toward the voice and froze. A man sat in the corner, half hidden in shadow. He was watching her with eyes the color of winter sky, the same eyes as the silver wolf. He was broad-shouldered and tall, even sitting, with silver-gray hair that fell past his shoulders and a face that looked carved from granite and time. Scars traced across his visible skin, his neck, his hands, one cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore simple clothes, dark. Pants, a heavy shirt, boots built for winter. But his scent hit her like a wall, aged oak, winter snow, pine forests, and the sharp, clean smell of a coming storm. It was power and safety wrapped together, and her absent wolf stirred for the first time since the rejection, lifting her head with interest. You're the wolf, Sarah said, her voice hoarse, the silver one. I am. He rose in one fluid movement, and Sarah's breath caught. He was massive, at least 6'6", maybe more, with the kind of presence that filled a room. My name is Talon Wolfsbane, commander of the Shadowborn Guard. The Shadowborn? Sarah shook her head. I don't understand. Why did you save me? How did you even find me? Talon moved closer, each step measured, and crouched near the fire so they were at eye level. His gaze searched her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. We found you because we've been searching for you, he said simply. For a very long time. That doesn't make any sense. You don't even know me? Don't I? A slight smile touched his scarred features. Tell me, Sarah Whitlock, have you ever wondered why your wolf felt so small? Why you had no strength when every Omega in history has had at least some? Why your parents looked at you with fear disguised as disappointment? Sarah's breath caught. How do you... Because you were bound. Talon's voice turned hard. Someone put binding magic on you when you were an infant. Strong magic, the kind that takes a powerful witch and blood sacrifice. It suppressed your wolf, locked away your power, made you appear as something you never were. No, Sarah shook her head. No, that's not. My parents would never. Your parents did exactly that. Another voice spoke from the doorway, and Sarah looked up to find a woman entering the cabin, tall and lean, with short black hair and sharp amber eyes. She wore fighting leathers and moved like a blade. Her scent was clean steel and mountain air. They bound you to protect you and themselves. This is Kira, Talon said, second of the Shadowborn Guard. Kira crossed her arms, studying Sarah with the same intensity as Talon. The question is, do you want to know what they were protecting you from? Or more importantly, what you actually are? Sarah's mouth went dry. What does that mean? Talon and Kira exchanged a look. Then Talon rose, walked to a pack in the corner, and pulled out an ancient book wrapped in oiled cloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing leather so old it looked ready to crumble. This, he said, is a record kept by my pack, the last of the Blood Moon tribe, for over 10 generations. It contains a prophecy, one we've been waiting to see fulfilled. He opened the book to a marked page and held it toward the firelight. The script was old, handwritten in fading ink, but still legible. When the blood moon rises full in autumn's dying breath, the matriarch will wake, born from death. She will be hidden, wrapped in chains of gold, her power bound by fear, her truth untold. She will be cast down by the weak who crown themselves strong, and in that casting, every chain will break, every binding gone wrong. She will rise with silver in her fur and stormlight in her eyes, larger than any alpha, ancient, terrible, wise. She will command the guard who waited, faithful, true, and she will bring the old ways back, make all things new. Sarah stared at the words, her heart hammering. You think this is about me? I don't think. Talon closed the book. I know. Every detail matches. You were born under the autumn blood moon 23 years ago. You were bound as an infant. You were cast out by an alpha who thought himself strong, and the moment that rejection severed the mate bond, his eyes glowed briefly gold, his wolf rising close to the surface, it shattered the binding spell. That's impossible. Is it? Kira moved closer, crouching beside Talon. Tell me, Sarah, right now, in this moment, how does your wolf feel? Sarah turned inward instinctively, reaching for that tiny, fragile presence that had been her companion since childhood, and found something entirely different. Her wolf wasn't small anymore. She wasn't absent. She was there, huge and glorious and burning with power that made Sarah gasp. The wolf's presence filled her mind like a cathedral, vast and ancient, and suddenly, terrifyingly awake. Hello, little one, the wolf said in a voice like silk and steel. Did you miss me? Sarah's hands began to shake. I can't. Breathe, Talon commanded, his voice taking on an alpha's authority that somehow soothed rather than dominated. Your wolf has been caged for over 2 decades. She's disoriented. So are you. But you need to let her out, Sarah. You need to shift. I haven't shifted since I was 15. I couldn't. It never worked right. It didn't work because you were fighting through magical chains. Kira's voice was surprisingly gentle. There are no chains now. Your wolf is free, and she's been waiting a very long time to show you what you really are. Please, her wolf whispered, please let me out. Let me show you. Sarah's chest heaved. Fear and hope and confusion crashed through her in equal measure. If this is wrong, if I'm not what you think, then we'll help you anyway, Talon said firmly. You were cast out to die, rejected and broken. Whether you're the matriarch of prophecy or simply a young woman who deserved better, we don't abandon those who need us. That's not who we are. Sarah looked between them. These 2 massive warriors who had found her, saved her, and were now looking at her like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. She made her decision. Okay, she whispered. Okay, tell me what to do. Talon's rare smile returned. Just let go. They led her outside into the moonlit clearing behind the cabin. Snow crunched under her bare feet, but she barely felt the cold. 8 more wolves waited there, the others from the circle that had saved her. They sat at attention, their eyes glowing in the darkness, and as Sarah approached, each one dipped their head in a gesture of respect that made her heart race. The guard, Talon said quietly. He'd removed his shirt despite the cold, preparing to shift. We've waited 3 centuries for this moment, for you. You don't even know if I can. You can. His certainty was absolute. Close your eyes, find your wolf, and instead of trying to force the shift like you used to, just invite her forward, ask her to show you what she is. Sarah closed her eyes. The winter air moved around her, carrying the scent of snow and pine and the wild smell of the wolves watching. Inside her mind, her wolf paced, huge and powerful and patient. Are you ready? The wolf asked. I don't know what I am, Sarah admitted. Then let me show you. The shift began, but it wasn't like the few times she'd managed it. As a child, those painful, stuttering transformations that left her exhausted and barely wolf-shaped. This was different. This was coming home. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward in waves. Her bones began to shift, not breaking, not snapping, but flowing like water, taking a new shape. She gasped as her body began to change, but there was no pain. only sensation. Fur erupted across her skin in a wave of silver white, so pale it almost glowed in the moonlight. Her hands changed, fingers shortening and reshaping into massive paws tipped with curved claws. Her face elongated, her senses exploding into overwhelming detail as her wolf's sharper perceptions took over. But she didn't stop growing. The wolves around her were massive, each twice the size of a normal alpha. Sarah surpassed them. Her body expanded, muscle and bone and power, unfolding like a flower opening to the sun. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the way the earth seemed to acknowledge her weight. The shift completed, Sarah stood on 4 legs and looked down at warriors who'd seemed giants moments before. She towered over them all. Her fur rippled with an inner light, silver white threaded with veins of gold that pulsed with each heartbeat. Her paws left glowing prints in the snow that faded slowly. Her tail was thick and long, her build powerful in a way that spoke of ancient breeding, something from before modern werewolves, something older and wilder and infinitely more dangerous. And her eyes, she could see her reflection in the cabin window, glowed like molten moonlight. "Look at you," her wolf whispered with satisfaction. "Look at what you really are." Sarah's first instinct was to panic, to try to shrink, to hide, but her wolf laughed, a warm, rich sound that filled her mind. "No more hiding, little queen. No more shame. You are matriarch. You are the storm they should have feared." Power erupted from Sarah in a wave that shook the ground. Snow burst away from her in a perfect circle. Trees swayed, and every wolf present, including Talon in his human form, dropped to their knees, their heads bowed. "Goddess above," Kira breathed, still in wolf form, her voice reaching Sarah's mind. "It's real. She's real." Sarah lifted her head and howled. The sound tore from her throat like a physical force, ancient and commanding and wild. It echoed through the mountains, carrying for miles, a declaration that the matriarch had awakened. Every wolf within range would hear it. Every creature would know that something fundamental had changed in the balance of power. And in Ironclaw territory, miles away, Alpha King Donovan Ironclaw would jolt upright in his bed, his blood running cold, recognizing a howl that made his alpha dominance feel like a candle next to the sun. When Sarah's howl faded, she looked down at the warriors surrounding her, the Shadowborn Guard who had waited 300 years. Talon shifted then, his transformation quick and practiced, and stood in his silver-gray wolf form. He was enormous, scarred, powerful. And he bowed his head completely, his voice reaching her mind. "My queen, we are yours. Command us, and we will move mountains. We have waited lifetimes to stand beside you." One by one, the other wolves spoke their names and oaths. Kira Steelclaw, your second, my queen. Gareth Ironhide, your shield. Lysa Moonwhisper, your healer. Rook Shadowstep, your scout. Thane Bloodmane, your strategist. Zara Wildfire, your warrior. Finn Nightrunner, your hunter. Ash Stormbreaker, your mage killer. Cole Earthshaker, your strong arm. Each oath resonated in Sarah's chest like a bell, creating bonds of pack and purpose that didn't feel like chains. They felt like strength. She should have been terrified. She should have been overwhelmed. Instead, she felt whole for the first time in her life. "We have work to do," Sarah said, her voice carrying to all of them with perfect clarity. "I have a territory to claim, a pack to humble, and a false king to teach the meaning of fear." 10 wolves raised their heads and howled their agreement, their voices joining hers in a harmony of power that split the winter night. The matriarch had risen, and nothing would ever be the same. The first week after her transformation passed in a blur of discovery and training. The cabin in the Forbidden Reach became their base, small and rough, but defensible, and far enough from Ironclaw territory that they could work undisturbed. Each morning, Sarah woke before dawn, her body still adjusting to the massive shift in her power. Shifting became easier. Where before it had been impossible, now it was as natural as breathing. She practiced going from human to wolf and back again, learning to hold the transformation, learning to shift partially, just claws, just enhanced senses, just strength, without the full change. "Control," Talon said on the 3rd morning, watching her shift from wolf to human and back in the span of 30 seconds, "is everything. Power without control is just destruction." They stood in the clearing, dawn light turning the snow golden. Talon was in his human form today, dressed in fighting leathers, his breath misting in the cold. Again. But this time, shift only your hands. Hold everything else human. Sarah focused, reaching for that place inside herself where human and wolf blurred together. Heat built in her hands and she felt her fingers change, bones flowing, nails extending into claws, fur rippling across her skin, while the rest of her remained human. She held them up, examining the partial shift with wonder. Good, Talon said. Now, catch. He threw a rock at her without warning. Instinct took over. Her clawed hand snapped out and caught the rock mid-air, her enhanced speed making the movement effortless. Better, he smiled. Your reflexes are waking up. Over the following days, the other members of the Shadowborn Guard took turns working with her, each teaching different skills. Lysa Moonwhisper, the healer, was a gentle presence with soft gray fur in wolf form and kind green eyes. In human form, she was small and curvy, with long silver hair and a voice like wind chimes. She taught Sarah about the empathic abilities that came with being matriarch. You can feel the pack, Lysa explained one afternoon, sitting cross-legged across from Sarah in the cabin. Every wolf connected to you, through oath or territory or blood, you'll sense them. Their emotions, their pain, their joy. It's how you'll know when your people need you. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out cautiously with her newfound senses. Immediately, she felt them, 10 bright presences surrounding her like stars. She could sense Talon's steady strength on patrol at the north edge, Kira's sharp focus as she sharpened weapons, Gareth's contentment as he cooked dinner. It's overwhelming, Sarah whispered. It will become natural, Lysa promised, and you can use it. Try this. I'm going to feel something. And you tell me what? Sarah nodded, focusing on Lysa's presence. A moment later, warmth flooded through their connection, gentle, golden, like sunlight on skin. Happy, Sarah said immediately. You're thinking of someone you love. Lysa's smile was bittersweet. My daughter. Lost 2 centuries ago, but you're correct. The empathic sense is strong in you. They worked on it for hours. Sarah learning to identify emotions, to sense when someone was hurt or lying or afraid. It was exhausting, but crucial. Kira handled combat training. You're large and powerful, the black-haired warrior said bluntly, circling Sarah in the clearing. But size isn't everything. You need to be fast, smart, unpredictable. She lunged without warning, and Sarah barely dodged. They spent hours sparring, Kira in human form with blunted training blades, Sarah shifting between forms, learning to use her size as an advantage without sacrificing mobility. You're a fortress, Kira panted after. Sarah finally managed to pin her. But even fortresses need to know when to move. Rook Shadowstep the scout was quiet and observant with dark brown fur and amber eyes. He taught Sarah to move through the forest without sound, to track by scent alone, to identify threats before they arrived. Your senses are a weapon, he said in his soft voice as they crouched in the underbrush, watching a herd of deer in the distance. You can hear a heartbeat from 100 yards, smell fear from farther. Use it. Thane Bloodmane, the strategist, was older with a gray and black coat and silver, streaking his dark hair in human form. He taught her pack politics, territorial law, the history of werewolf society. The Alpha system, he explained one evening over maps spread across the cabin floor, is relatively new. 2,000 years old at most. Before that, packs were led by matriarchs, females like you with power that transcended normal wolves. They were queens, protectors, the moon goddesses, direct representatives. What happened to them? Sarah asked. Thane's expression darkened. They were killed, systematically. Alpha males decided they wanted power for themselves. Over the span of 500 years, they hunted down every matriarch they could find. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was nearly too late. You're the first to emerge in 3 centuries. The weight of that settled on Sarah's shoulders like a mantle. But alongside the training came something else, belonging. The Shadowborn Guard wasn't just a military unit. They were a family. Zara Wildfire, fierce and laughing with red gold fur and a personality to match, taught Sarah dirty tavern songs while they sparred. Finn Nightrunner, lean and quick with midnight black fur, challenged her to races through the forest that left them both breathless with laughter. Ash Stormbreaker, quiet and intense with storm gray coloring, shared his knowledge of magic and how to sense spell work. Cole Earthshaker, the largest of the guard besides Sarah herself, was gentle despite his size. He had warm brown fur and kind eyes, and he cooked meals that made the little cabin feel like home. Gareth Ironhide, steady and loyal with steel-gray fur, appointed himself her personal guard and followed her everywhere with devoted attention. "You don't have to," Sarah protested after the 5th day of him sleeping across her doorway in wolf form. "Yes, I do," he rumbled. "You're my queen. My purpose. I've waited 300 years to protect you. Let me do my job." And through it all was Talon. Talon, who pushed her hardest in training but was first to praise her successes. Talon, who sat with her during the late-night hours when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. Talon, whose scent of oak and winter snow made her wolf purr with contentment. "Tell me about the guard," she asked him one night, sitting by the fire while the others slept. "How did you all survive 300 years? Talon stared into the flames, his profile sharp and scarred. "A witch gave us extended life as payment for saving her daughter. She made us immortal, not invulnerable, but ageless, so we could wait for the next matriarch. We've lived through empires rising and falling, through the industrial age, through everything, waiting for you." "That sounds lonely." It was. He turned to look at her, his winter sky eyes reflecting firelight. "Until now." Something warm unfurled in Sarah's chest. Not the golden thread of a fated mate bond, but something else. Something chosen. Something real. "Talon," she said softly, "what happens when I take back my territory, when I face Donovan and the Ironclaw pack?" His jaw tightened. "Then we remind them what happens when they reject a queen." The scout arrived on the 14th day. Sarah was in the clearing practicing her howl, learning to infuse it with command, with power, with specific intentions. When Rook's urgent whistle cut through the air, she shifted. Instantly, her massive wolf form towering as Rook burst from the tree line in his own wolf form. "Company," he sent urgently. "Ironclaw scout, young, male, he's seen you." Sarah's hackles rose. "Where?" "North Ridge. Gareth has him pinned but unharmed. Your orders?" The rest of the guard emerged from the cabin and forest, shifting to wolf form, ready for battle. Talon came to stand beside her, his presence steady. "Show me," Sarah commanded. They ran. The forest blurred past as Sarah raced through the trees, her pack flowing around her like shadows. Her size should have made her clumsy, but instead, she felt powerful. Every stride eating up ground, her enhanced senses tracking the path ahead. They reached the ridge in minutes. Gareth had the scout pinned against a boulder, a young male, maybe 19, with sandy fur and terrified amber eyes. The moment he saw Sarah emerge from the trees, he froze. "Goddess protect us," the scout breathed into the mental space. "The prophecy. It's real." Sarah approached slowly, letting him see every inch of her, the size, the power, the glowing silver fur. She loomed over him and he whimpered. "Your name," she commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. "T. Carson, my lady. Carson Greymane. I'm just a patrol scout. I didn't mean to. I was just—" "Why are you in the Forbidden Reach?" "Alpha Donovan sent extended patrols. He's been different since the rejection. Paranoid. Angry. He heard your howl 2 weeks ago, and he's had wolves searching ever since." Sarah's blood ran cold. "He knows I'm alive. Everyone knows." Carson's fear spiked. "Your howl reached 3 territories. Every pack in the region felt it. Donovan's been preparing for war." Talon growled low in his throat. "How many wolves?" 20 in active patrol, another 50 in reserve. Carson looked between them. "Please, I don't want to fight you. I don't want any part of this. Donovan's mate bond rejection, what he did to you, it was wrong. Everyone knows it was wrong. Then, why follow him?" Kira snarled. "Because he's the Alpha King." Carson's eyes were wild with fear. "Because he has power and territory and the pack laws on his side. Because refusing means exile or death." Sarah studied the young scout, reading his emotions through her empathic sense. Fear, yes, but also shame, disgust. He didn't want to be here. She made a decision. Go back, she said quietly. The guard startled. My queen, Gareth protested. Go back, Sarah repeated to Carson. Tell your Alpha King that Sarah Whitlock lives. Tell him the matriarch has risen. Tell him that in 3 days I will come to reclaim what is mine, my territory, my dignity, and his crown. Carson's jaw dropped. You're declaring war. I'm declaring sovereignty. Sarah's eyes blazed. He can surrender or he can fight, but either way, the old days are ending. Tell him. Tell everyone. He'll come with everything he has, Carson whispered. Good. Sarah leaned down until they were eye to eye. Because I want witnesses when I teach him what real power looks like. She stepped back, and Gareth released the scout. Carson scrambled to his feet, shifted to human form for a moment, revealing a skinny kid with sandy hair and wide eyes, then back to wolf. He bolted into the forest. The guard surrounded Sarah the moment he was gone. Are you certain about this? Talon asked, his concern bleeding through their connection. 3 days isn't much time. It's enough. Sarah turned to face her pack. I'm done hiding. I'm done being small. Donovan rejected me to show his power. Now I'm going to show him mine. And I want every wolf in the territory to watch. He'll bring everyone, Thane warned. Full force. Sarah bared her teeth in a wolf smile. I'm counting on it. 3 days. They spent them preparing. Talon drilled her relentlessly on combat strategies for fighting multiple opponents. Kira taught her intimidation techniques, how to use her size and presence to make enemies hesitate. Thane helped her plan what she'd say, how she'd present herself, which pack laws to invoke. You're not just fighting Donovan, the old strategist explained. You're reclaiming your place in werewolf society. Every word matters, every gesture. You need to be queen and warrior both. On the second day, they moved closer to Ironclaw territory, making camp in a cave system near the border. Sarah could smell her old pack in the distance, familiar scents that made her chest ache with complicated emotions. She'd lived there for 23 years. Those wolves had been her world, and they'd watched her cast out to die. Are you ready for this? Her wolf asked gently. I don't know, Sarah admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. The night before the confrontation, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat outside the cave in human form, wrapped in furs, watching the moon. Talon found her there. Nervous? He asked, settling beside her. Terrified, she admitted. What if I'm not enough? What if the prophecy is wrong? What if I fail? You won't. You can't. Know that. Yes, I can. Talon turned to face her fully. I've lived 300 years, Sarah. I've seen empires crumble and heroes fall. I know strength when I see it. And you, from the moment you survived that rejection, that winter storm, that moment when you should have broken, you've been strong. The magic just hit it. Sarah's throat tightened. Donovan didn't think so. Donovan is a fool. Talon's voice turned hard. He looked at you and saw weakness. He should have seen power. He should have seen his queen, his loss, his mistake. And tomorrow, you're going to make him regret it for the rest of his life. Something warm bloomed in Sarah's chest. Why do you believe in me so completely? Talon was quiet for a long moment. Then, because the first time I saw you, broken and dying in the snow, you were still fighting. Your heart still beat. Your wolf, tiny and bound as she was, still tried to keep you alive. That's who you are, Sarah. You're a survivor, a fighter, and now that you have the power to match your spirit. He smiled. The world should be very, very afraid. Sarah looked at this massive warrior who'd waited lifetimes for her, who commanded the loyalty of 9 other ancient wolves, who looked at her like she was something precious. Talon, she said softly, when this is over, when I've won or lost, will you stay? His expression softened. I'll stay until the stars burn out if you'll have me. Not as my guard, as... She hesitated, searching for the right words. The mate bond with Donovan. That was Destiny's mistake. But you, this, what I feel when you're near. She met his eyes. This feels like choice. Talon's breath caught. Sarah? I'm not asking for forever right now, she interrupted. I'm just asking, after tomorrow, after everything settles. Maybe we could see what this is? Talon cupped her face in his scarred hands, his touch gentle despite his size. I've waited 300 years for you to exist. I can wait a little, longer to see where this goes. He pressed his forehead to hers. But for the record, I already know where it's going. I knew the moment I saw you still breathing in that storm. Sarah's eyes stung with tears. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. He pulled back, his winter sky eyes intense. And tomorrow, I'm going to help you take it. Dawn broke cold and clear. The Shadowborn Guard stood in formation at the edge of Ironclaw territory, just shy of the border markers. All 11 of them had shifted to wolf form, 10 massive ancient warriors and one glowing matriarch who towered over them all. Across the clearing, Alpha King Donovan Ironclaw arrived with his war party. 20 wolves flanked him in formation, all alphas or high betas, all battle-ready. Vivian Blackthorn paced at his right hand, her black fur sleek and her eyes burning with hatred. And at the center, Donovan stood in his russet-brown wolf form, his ice-blue eyes locked on Sarah. She felt his shock, through the air. His disbelief. Impossible, his voice projected, meant for her ears only. You died. You should be dead. You should have chosen me, Sarah replied coldly. The two forces faced each other across 30 yards of neutral ground. The morning sun glinted off the snow, and the forest had gone silent. Even the birds understood that something momentous was happening. Sarah stepped forward, and the Ironclaw wolves flinched. She was massive, glowing, undeniably powerful in a way that made every wolf present instinctively want to bare their throats in submission. I am Sarah Whitlock, she announced, her voice carrying to every wolf present and beyond, wolves in the packlands, wolves in their homes, all of them drawn by the power in her words. You cast me out, you threw me into the winter to die, you rejected me, humiliated me, and called me weak. Donovan's hackles rose. You were weak, an omega. I was a queen in chains. Sarah's roar shook the ground. Several Ironclaw wolves dropped to their bellies involuntarily. I was bound from birth by magic you knew nothing about, suppressed and hidden because the matriarch's power threatened everything your precious alpha hierarchy built on stolen ground. Shocked murmurs rippled through the Ironclaw ranks. That's a myth, Donovan snarled, but his voice wavered. Matriarchs are legends. Then explain me. Sarah stalked forward, and Donovan actually retreated a step. Explain how an Omega survived a winter storm. Explain how she's standing before you now, larger than any Alpha, with a guard of 10 warriors who are each stronger than your best. Explain how her howl reached across 3 territories and made you shiver in your bed at night. She could feel Donovan's fear now, see it in the way he held himself, the way his tail tucked slightly. You made a mistake, Sarah continued. You didn't just reject your mate, you rejected your queen, and that rejection, that severing of the bond, shattered the bindings that held my power. You freed me, Donovan, and now I'm here to take what's mine. Vivian lunged forward, snarling. You have no claim here. Donovan is the rightful Alpha King, and I am his chosen mate. You're nothing but... Sarah moved. One moment she was 20 feet away. The next, she had Vivian pinned to the ground with one massive paw on her throat, her glowing eyes boring into the beta's shocked face. Speak again without permission, Sarah said softly, and I'll rip your throat out. The speed of it, the casual, overwhelming power, sent a wave of panic through the Ironclaw ranks. Several wolves broke formation, backing away. Sarah released Vivian and turned back to Donovan. You have a choice, Alpha King. Bend the knee and acknowledge me as matriarch of this territory, or fight me, here, now, in front of everyone. You can't. Pack law states. Pack law is mine to write. Power rolled off Sarah in waves. I am what stood before your alpha system existed. I am what you tried to erase from history. I am the moon goddess's chosen, and I am done asking for permission. Donovan looked at his wolves, at Vivian, still gasping on the ground, at the Shadowborn Guard, who watched with predatory patience. His pride warred with his survival instinct. Pride won. I am Alpha King, Donovan snarled, power building around him, and I will not surrender to an Omega who got lucky with some tricks. He lunged. The fight was over in seconds. Donovan was fast. He was powerful. He was a trained Alpha King in his prime. Sarah was something ancient and unstoppable. She caught him mid-air with one paw, slammed him into the ground hard enough to crack earth, and held him there with effortless pressure while he thrashed and snarled. Her jaws closed around his throat, not biting, just holding, and she let him feel how easily she could end him. "Submit," she commanded. "Never." Sarah's eyes blazed. Power erupted from her, not hurting him, but overwhelming him, pressing down with such absolute dominance that Donovan's body betrayed him. His thrashing stopped. His growls turned to whimpers. His wolf, faced with something so far beyond Alpha that there was no comparison, finally broke. His throat bared. Sarah released him and stepped back. Donovan lay in the snow, panting, his eyes wide with shock and shame and broken pride. "I said you have a choice," Sarah repeated quietly. "Submit or die. Choose." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, Donovan lowered his head completely to the ground, the ultimate gesture of submission from one wolf to another. I submit," he whispered. "Mercy, matriarch, I submit." The Ironclaw wolves stared in stunned silence. Their alpha king, the dominant male who had ruled for 15 years, was on his belly before an omega he'd cast out. Sarah turned to face the rest of the Ironclaw pack. "I am Sarah Whitlock, matriarch of the Northern Territories. I claim this land and all who live here under my protection. The old ways are returning. The laws are changing, and any wolf who cannot accept a queen in place of a king is free to leave. But if you stay," her eyes blazed, "you kneel." One by one, they dropped. First the younger wolves, then the betas, then the older alphas who'd lived long enough to remember stories of matriarchs from their grandparents. Within minutes, every wolf in the clearing had their throats bared to the sky. Behind Sarah, the Shadowborn Guard raised their heads and howled, a victory cry that echoed across the territory. "Rise," Sarah commanded after a long moment. "You are pack, you are mine, and I protect what's mine." The wolves rose and she could feel it, the pack bonds forming, not forced, not demanded, but offered and accepted. A web of connection that linked her to dozens, then hundreds of wolves as word spread across the territory. She was Pack Alpha, she was queen, she was matriarch. Sarah turned back to Donovan, who still lay in the snow, broken. "You will tell me," she said quietly, "why my parents bound me. You will bring them here. And you will face your punishment for what you did. What will you do to me?" Sarah considered. Revenge would be easy. He'd humiliated her, rejected her, cast her out to die. She could do the same to him, worse, but she was better than that. "You will remain Alpha of Ironclaw Pack," she said finally, "under my authority. You will enforce my laws. You will protect the weak instead of despising them. You will learn what it means to lead with integrity instead of ego. And every day for the rest of your life, you will remember that you rejected your queen and lived only because she was merciful." Donovan's eyes widened. He'd expected death or exile. He got something worse, the chance to become better. "Yes, matriarch," he whispered. Sarah looked at Vivian, who watched with hatred and fear in equal measure. "And you chose ambition over honor. You will be stripped of your beta rank. You will serve the pack at the lowest level. You will learn humility. You can't, I can." Sarah's voice turned to ice. "And I am. Challenge me, and I'll send you into true exile. Accept your punishment, and you may earn your way back to status through service. Choose." Vivian's jaw clenched, but she lowered her head. "Yes, matriarch." The sun had fully risen now, turning the clearing golden. Sarah stood in the center of her new territory, surrounded by her pack, old and new, and felt the weight of everything settle onto her shoulders. It should have been crushing. Instead, it felt right. Talon padded to her side, his presence steady and strong. "You did it," he said softly. "You're queen." "We did it," Sarah corrected. "I couldn't have survived without you, without all of you." The Shadowborn Guard surrounded her, and the Ironclaw wolves watched with wonder and fear and growing respect. "What now, my lady?" Kira asked. Sarah looked at her territory, at the forest and mountains that had been her prison and were now her kingdom, at the wolves who had cast her out and were now her responsibility. "Now," she said quietly, "we build something new, something better. We teach them what the old ways really meant, not dominance through fear, but strength through protection, not hierarchy through birth, but honor through action. She raised her head, her voice carrying to every wolf present. I am Sarah Whitlock, matriarch of the Northern Territories. This is my land, these are my people, and I will defend them with everything I am. The pack, hundreds of voices, rose in a howl that shook the heavens. 3 months later, the Northern Territories had transformed. The old pack house had been renovated into a proper stronghold, with space for the Shadowborn Guard and the growing number of wolves who swore allegiance directly to the matriarch. Sarah established new laws, protections for omegas, rights for challenged wolves, mandatory training for all ranks, harsh penalties for cruelty. The other alphas in neighboring territories had tested her at first. 3 packs had sent challenges. All 3 had withdrawn after witnessing her power and the terrifying efficiency of the Shadowborn Guard. Word spread. The matriarch had returned. The old ways were coming back. Some wolves celebrated, others feared, but all respected. Donovan served as her second-in-command within Ironclaw Pack, and to everyone's surprise, including his own, he was better for it. Without the crushing pressure of being Alpha King, without the need to constantly prove his dominance, he discovered that he actually enjoyed protecting his pack rather than ruling them through fear. He'd apologized to Sarah privately 3 weeks after her victory. She'd accepted. Forgiveness would take longer, but they were building something like mutual respect. Vivian had fled after 2 months of grunt work. No one stopped her, and Sarah's parents. They'd arrived the day after her confrontation with Donovan, summoned by direct order. They'd walked into the throne room, a grand hall in the old pack, house that Sarah rarely used, preferring to meet with her people in less formal settings, and dropped to their knees the moment they saw her. Matriarch, her father had said, his voice shaking. Why? Sarah had interrupted. Just one word, but it carried every ounce of her hurt and confusion. Her mother had been the one to answer, tears streaming down her face. Because we were afraid. 23 years ago, a witch came to us with a prophecy, told us our daughter would be the matriarch, would have power beyond imagining, would change the world. And she told us that power would make our baby a target. Every alpha who feared the old ways would come for you. So we hired her to bind your power, to hide you, to keep you safe. You made me think I was weak, Sarah said quietly. You let me believe I was worthless. We know, her father's voice broke. We thought if you believed it, if everyone believed it, you'd be safe. We never imagined the moon goddess would create a mate bond with an alpha who would reject you. We never imagined that rejection would break the binding. You never imagined I'd become what you were so afraid of. They'd had no answer for that. Sarah had exiled them for 5 years, not forever, not death, but punishment for their betrayal, tempered with understanding that they'd acted from love, however misguided. They'd left quietly, promising to return when their sentence was complete, hoping for forgiveness they didn't deserve. Sarah hoped she'd be ready to give it by then. Now, on a cool spring evening, Sarah stood on the balcony of her private quarters, looking out over the territory. The pack house hummed with life below, wolves laughing, training, living, her people. She heard the door open behind her and smiled before she even turned around. She knew that scent, oak and winter snow and home. Busy day? Talon asked, stepping onto the balcony. He was in human form tonight, dressed casually, his long silver hair loose around his shoulders. 3 months together had taught her his moods, his expressions, his silences. Tedious day, Sarah corrected. 3 hours listening to border disputes, 2 more reviewing supply inventories. I never realized how much paperwork comes with being queen. You could delegate more. I could. She leaned back against him as he wrapped his arms around her waist. But I won't. These wolves deserve a leader who pays attention. Talon pressed a kiss to her temple. You're doing remarkably well, you know. The territory is stable. Crime is down. Neighboring packs are starting to follow your example with their own laws. Only because I have you. Sarah turned in his arms, looking up at the scarred, beautiful face of the male who'd saved her life. You and the guard. I couldn't do this alone. You could, Talon said firmly, but you'll never have to. Something warm and golden had been growing between them over the past 3 months. Not the explosive, fate-driven bond she'd had with Donovan that had burned itself out in rejection, and she was glad it was gone. This was different, chosen, built on trust and respect and genuine affection. "Talon," Sarah said softly, "I need to tell you something." His expression grew serious. "What?" "The mate bond with Donovan. When it was severed, it left a scar. A place where something should be that's just empty." She touched her chest over her heart. "For months I thought it would always be empty, that I'd broken somehow." "Sarah, but it's not empty anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes bright. "It's filling with something new, something better. When you're near, I feel it. When you're gone, I miss it. And I realized the moon goddess doesn't just give us one chance at love. Sometimes she gives us the right one." Talon's breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that I want to see if this, us, can become something permanent. Not because fate demands it, because I choose it." She reached up to cup his face. "Because I choose you." For a moment, the ancient warrior who'd lived 3 centuries and seen everything looked undone by the simple honesty of a young woman who'd survived rejection and found herself. Then, he kissed her. It was gentle and fierce and perfect, and Sarah felt something click into place in her chest. Not the golden thread of a mate bond, not yet, but the beginning of one. Something they were building together, brick by brick, day by day. When they finally broke apart, Talon pressed his forehead to hers. 300 years I waited, and you're worth every moment. Even the tedious border disputes? Especially those," he grinned. "I'm a fan of tedious now." They stood together in the spring evening, alpha and matriarch, warrior and queen, watching the sun set over their territory. Below, in the training yard, the Shadowborn Guard was working with young wolves, teaching them to fight with honor and protect with strength. In the pack house, families gathered for dinner. In the forest, patrols ran the borders, keeping their people safe. It wasn't perfect. There were still problems to solve, still enemies watching from the shadows, still wolves who resented the changes. But it was hers, and she would defend it with everything she was. As if reading her thoughts, Talon said quietly, "There's something you should know. Rook sent a report this morning. There's been movement at the southern border, strange wolves. They don't carry any pack scent, and they're moving in coordinated patterns." Sarah's contentment faded, replaced by alert focus. "How many?" "At least 20, maybe more." "Organized rogue wolves, or something else?" "We don't know yet." Talon's expression was grim. "But they're moving toward our territory, and they don't seem afraid. That worries me." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd known peace wouldn't last forever. Power drew challenges, change drew resistance, and a matriarch rising from 3 centuries of absence would draw attention from every corner of the werewolf world, not all of it friendly. "Then we prepare," she said firmly. "Double the patrols, bring the guard to full alert, and let's find out who these strangers are before they reach our borders." "Yes, my lady." Talon's voice was formal, but his hand squeezed hers gently. "Though I have to say, threats and danger and unknown enemies? What about them?" His grin was sharp. "Just another day serving the matriarch." Sarah laughed despite herself. "You're terrible." "I'm yours," he corrected. "There's a difference." They went inside together, leaving the balcony and the sunset behind. There would be time for romance later. For now there was work to do, a territory to protect, threats to assess, and a kingdom to defend. But for the first time in her life, Sarah wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready. And so, Sarah Whitlock's journey from broken Omega to powerful matriarch reached a moment of calm before the next storm. She'd survived rejection, discovered her true nature, claimed her territory, and found not just power, but purpose. She'd learned that strength wasn't about dominance or cruelty. It was about protection and justice and choosing to be better than those who came before. But as new threats gathered at her borders and old enemies watched from the shadows, her story was far from over. The matriarch had risen, yes, but rising was only the beginning. What happens when a queen must defend everything she's built? When the wolves who hunt in the darkness finally reveal themselves? when the true cost of power becomes clear. Those are stories for another chapter. What did you think of Sarah's transformation? Would you have handled the confrontation with Donovan differently? What do you think those mysterious wolves at the southern border want? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your theories and reactions. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. There's so much more to come. Battles to fight, mysteries to solve, and romances to explore in the world of the matriarch. The blood moon is rising again, and with it, ancient powers are waking. Powers that make even a matriarch look vulnerable. Powers that have been waiting in the dark, watching, preparing. Will Sarah be ready when they finally strike? Thank you for listening to this chapter. We'll see you in the next one.